Hello, Fai Cheng here with the reasons why almost all modern day marketing and sales techniques are malpractice. And what I mean by malpractice is when you look at the sentence, the quote you've surely seen before, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. Well, this is something that modern day, modern consumers, modern customers, modern clients deep down know. They know that they are being sold to, and as a result, they are not interested. They say, I am not interested, but really deep down what they're thinking is, I don't want to be sold to, I don't want to be taken advantage of, and certainly not taken advantage of again. And please pay attention to this again, because this lies at the core of not only the problem, but also the solution to this dilemma. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're constantly struggling with people who say, I'm not interested, whether they say this explicitly to your face or by simply ignoring your ads or whatever marketing material you've got out there, you will find a lot of value in this. So let's look at the solution then to this whole thing. We want to get rid, basically, of this underlying unease, of this deep feeling of someone is taking advantage of me, someone is trying to sell me something without really knowing what it is I need or want. And when you get that in place, you basically get rid of this I am not interested. The solution is centered or has the foundation in Chet Holmes's Ultimate Sales Machine. In it, he has a fantastic model, which if you've read the book, you will recognize immediately. And it goes something like this. Roughly 3% of the population, which is this top of the pyramid, the red part here, is ready to take action. These are the people who are ready to sign on the line. And the example he gives in the book is that if you go into a big room with, let's say, 1,000 people, and you ask, who's currently looking to buy a car? Roughly 30 people, meaning 3%, will raise their hand. If you then ask a different question, like who's currently looking to remodel their kitchen? Again, roughly 3% will raise their hand. So it turns out it's almost a law of nature that roughly 3% of the population are ready. They have done their due diligence, they've done their research, they are ready to pull the trigger, they're ready to sign on the dotted line. The rest are not. Now, at the very bottom of this pyramid, there are those who are not a good fit. There's always a certain percentage who are just not a good fit. They don't like you, they don't like your stuff. They just think they don't want it. They never ever want to do business with you. Fine. However, and this is the key insight from Chet Holmes's work, is that there is a massive proportion in the middle who could quite possibly be superb clients for you. But at this point, they are for some reason saying, well, I'm not interested. And our job is to find out why they're saying this, and then deal with it, give them the information they need so they can say, oh, I am interested. Now, there's a bit of a reason why I'm using Wonder Woman here as an example, because you can be an absolute hero to these people in the middle, because they have been sold to, quite often missold. So if you now do them a service and actually help them get to where they want to be, you are an absolute superhero or heroine in this case here. So the underlying model then of what's going on in this middle bit, why people say I'm not interested, is that really deep down they have a sequence of questions, and every single time they can give or find an answer that says yes, they come to a, let's call it a micro yes. And there's a whole sequence of micro questions which, whenever you follow it with a micro yes, or they can follow for themselves with a micro yes, ultimately they get to a macro yes, namely they go and buy your thing, your product or service. And this thing right here is, and again, I think you've probably, or I assume you've probably heard this term, it's tapping into the conversation that is going on in their heads. Your prospects, your prospective clients, they have questions, they're seeking a solution to a problem, and there's a conversation going around in their heads. And all the little questions that come up in this thing, if you can help them answer those in a positive way for them, that they go, yes, that makes sense, they will ultimately get to the macro yes at the very, very top. And this is what we're trying to set up strategically. Now, there is a reason why, and now let's look at the underlying reason why so much of today's sales tactics and marketing tactics fall flat, why they cause this sales resistance, why they cause the I'm not interested in the first place. And it all has to do with two core assumptions or two main problems. The first one is that when you look at the traditional sales model of, for example, AIDA, the attention followed by interest, followed by desire, followed by action. Well, most of the material, most of the sales tactics out there focus on the front end, namely getting attention, and then focusing on the end bit, the action. And I'm going to skip over the history of how this came about. The big summary is that basically when you look at newspaper ads, that's where these techniques were developed. A newspaper ad had a function to grab someone's attention immediately and immediately pull them over to taking action, because at the end of the day there is no time to educate anyone in the middle. If you don't get someone's attention, the ad is wasted. If you don't get someone to immediately call you up, again, the effort is wasted, because the next day the paper is gone, it's in the bin. So the techniques behind this there's a reason why they are so extremely focused on hardwired responses, on power words, on headlines that get attention-grabbing headlines, on urgency and scarcity. It is all that background with the newspapers. So anyway, the big picture is these tactical approaches to selling and marketing are very much focused on the front end of this whole conversation that is going on in their heads, and the back end. And that causes a major problem. Namely, people are not paying attention to you. So what do these tactics do? Well, they shout louder, they use more power words, or people don't take action. So what happens? There is urgency, or you add more scarcity, or you add extra bonuses, or you stack the value even higher. And because people are aware of this, they pay even less attention. They become blind to this. And you'll see this in the concept of market maturity, where markets get more and more jaded, if you like, because the claims are ever inflated up to the point where they are no longer believable. So the underlying problem number one here, when we look at this model of the prime focus being at the attention-grabbing stage and the getting people to take action stage, is that you have a situation where people don't pay attention and don't take action, and now you're using tools to solve that problem, but the tools themselves cause that lack of attention, or the active disinterest and the lack of taking action, the skepticism in the first place. So it's a bit of a circular thing that's going on, or a self-perpetuating, and unfortunately it kind of pushes you into a dead end, because at some point the arguments, the bonuses, the claims are simply no longer believable. So there's a second problem, and that's best explained by looking at what's going on in the middle then between attention and action. When you ignore the AIDA formula, or you look at the center part of AIDA, namely interest and desire, and by the way, I've put those things in brackets because in practice most people find it relatively easy to get attention, and at least deploy tools to attempt to get attention and enforce some action, because that's well researched. But to get someone's real interest and desire is a lot harder, and it's a lot more vague, because there are no clearly defined tools. You don't have a specific tool that says use the commitment and consistency principle to get interest, or use extra scarcity. There is no such thing. Anyway, when we look at the overall journey now and ignore the endpoints, but instead focus on the center bit, namely the bit where, and now we go back to the original model, where you have a conversation going on in people's heads, and they need to have a sequence of micro yeses. It's basically a journey. They are seeking a solution to a problem. Now this is almost like a mini Q&A, and big picture, this is very similar, if not the same, as qualifying in selling. Now, of course, you've got the circular argument, well, if no one pays attention to me, I can't qualify. And that's exactly what we're looking to overcome here. So anyway, the big problem number two is then when we look at this idea that the bulk of the people, and look at the Chet Holmes pyramid here, 3% at the very top are at this stage where they are ready, but really below it are 97. Well, if we ignore the bottom bit, let's say it's 60 to 70% of people are currently seeking a solution. They have questions that need to be answered before they can take action. Now, the big problem is that most marketing assumes that people are ready. All the techniques are basically assuming that your client or your prospective client is ready to put pen to paper. That's why we have all these tools. We have urgency, scarcity, act now. We have bonuses. If you act now, then you will get all kinds of good things will happen. If you don't act now, all kinds of bad things will happen. You have NLP patterns. You have hardwired responses. You have pre-selling. But it's all centered around this one idea, namely, people have done their due diligence and they are ready to move forward. And that is a massive, massive oversight, or a wrong assumption, because when you look at the previous slide here, it's clear from the Chet Holmes pyramid that the vast majority of people are not at a stage where they're ready to pull the trigger. So there you go. 2 fundamental reasons why these sort of tactical approaches of deploying urgency and scarcity and attention-grabbing headlines, etc., are not a tool that is appropriate for an audience that makes a considered decision. By all means, if you have impulse purchases, if you sell widgets on Amazon, exploit the hardwired responses until the cows come home. But for anyone who has a client who needs to make a considered decision, you are ignoring, at least with tactical approaches like the Cialdini reciprocity and free reports and all that kind of thing, you're ignoring the fact that most people are in search for answers, real answers, before they can make a real decision. And of course, when you have the situation that you are treating them like they're ready, but they're not quite ready, you inevitably end up with the situation where you have smokescreen objections. People come up with this, oh, I need to think about it, oh, I need to, etc. I need to ask my mom. The reason is because there's a certain feeling of unease. They know deep down that they are not ready to pull the trigger, and yet you are telling them, look, you need to pull the trigger, sign here now, it's good for you. Well, sadly, they haven't seen for themselves, they don't truly believe that this is good for them, and as a result they come up with these smokescreen objections. So I'll give you 2 examples. One is tapping into the conversation at the attention grabbing stage. Here's some work we did with a plumber in the UK. This is about 10 years ago when we were doing, or they were still doing, newspaper ads. And Dave of Gas Angel Services had tried everything. He had, studied copywriting and headlines. And as you can see from this ad, everything you need to do proper copywriting or direct response marketing is in there. You have to act now. There's a free guarantee. There is a power flush and wireless room start, and the whole thing in red. Only $1,649. A big attention-grabbing headline, must be sold. Guess what? He could not compete with the big guys in town because they had bigger ads. So bigger ads was more eyeballs, and as a result, he was struggling. So he tried a couple of other things, different color scheme, more warranty, more free stuff, and even cheaper price. And still, people didn't respond. So at that point, he came to us, and we looked at this and said, look, Dave, let's try something else, totally different. Namely, why don't we ask if people are worried about their heating bills? And guess what? We got a much better response than the high-efficiency Vocera boiler offer. And then we tried something else and something else. And in the end, we came up with this one here, which was the almost best ad. It was basically focused on the silent killer carbon monoxide. Now, as you can see here, Dave had trouble letting go of all the things he'd learned, namely that you have free stuff in there and offer prices, and you must act now. We ultimately managed to persuade him or convince him, and he tried it out. And the winning ad, which unfortunately I no longer have, is a very, very simple ad. All it had in there was a picture of a happy couple in the kitchen, gas boiler in the background. I believe it is the second one, this one here. It's that picture with a simple headline, "Are you worried about carbon monoxide poisoning?" And that's it. A call to action at the end, call us on dumb, and that's it. That was the absolute winner. It changed everything. So here's an example of conversation that is going on and tapping into it at the attention stage without being overly salesy. Here are people who are worried about something, and now you provide a solution without even mentioning that you're servicing or selling gas boilers. The second example I've got for you is an example of a luggage store that was focused on high-end luxury luggage. And we didn't work for them or with them. Instead, we were consulting for a newspaper, and their sales reps had trouble closing sales or even getting appointments and then closing sales. So I went along and I was introduced as the new colleague who was learning the ropes, but really my job was to observe the conversation and see what's going on in the sales conversation. The poor salesperson kept driving home all the benefits of the newspaper ad, plus the incredible cheap price. And the owner of the luggage store kept responding, I'm paraphrasing now, in a way where he said, look, I need to know that you're attracting high quality clients. I need to know that people see that my store is about quality. So very quickly, it transpired that we had two totally different messages here. The owner was all about, I need to make sure people know my store is about quality, whereas the sales rep didn't hear it. The sales rep was only going on about the best price, and he could do a free advertorial, and he could throw in color, and 2 for the price of one, and so on. In the end, we left with no deal, and it was all because the conversation that was going on in the prospect's head, namely the store owner, was, look, I need to make sure quality, my image, it needs to be transferred, it needs to be transmitted, everyone needs to know I am about quality. And the conversation that was going on in the sales rep's head was, this person isn't biting, I'm lowering prices, I'm cutting into my own commission here, I'm going cheaper and cheaper, and they're still not responding. So they tried everything, all the tricks in the book, and it just did not work. Of course, we told them afterwards how to fix this problem. So 2 examples of where a conversation is going on, and you either tap into it or you don't, and then you get very, very different results. So a couple of benefits of focusing on this journey then, rather than the endpoints. Now we look at the journey in the sense of the conversation that's going on, the questions that are going on. When you do this and you're being respectful of what people really need to know, you typically get much better success stories, or you get successful outcomes for your clients, and as a result you get success stories which you can use in your own marketing. You get repeat business, which is huge. A lot of people focus exclusively or focus all their effort on acquiring new clients. And as you know from practice, that is very, very hard. It is much easier to make one client very happy and have repeat business from them. Keep providing massive value. And of course, the next one, massive, 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 which should be the core driver for almost anyone who's in the sales profession, namely referrals. Testimonials, the list goes on. Now, you might be asking, well, okay, if someone is going through this cycle and at some point they say no, I gave them an answer and they say no to this, well, here's my counter argument. That's not a bad thing, not at all. I mean, yes, they will, in that case, be unlikely to be doing business with you right now. However, someone who does business with you later because you were respectful of their needs at that point is much, much better. So this is a great way of branding and building massive goodwill. The other thing is, even if they never ever come to you, because one of the questions they might have had, let's just make something up, it might be very important to them that you have 24/7 customer service. And Dave the plumber in the UK says, look, I only do 8 to 6 in the evening. I don't do anything outside this. In that case, they might decide, well, this is not for me. There are all kinds of reasons why people decide not to do business with you. However, when you take care of them up to that point, and they feel that they were taken care of, that is the ultimate foundation for referrals. Think about it. Every single time you have an outstanding experience with any business, I mean truly outstanding, underlying that outstandingness is that you feel you were taken care of. And that's the moment you feel taken care of, you go and tell others about it. I'll tell you about one right now. Go to peppersbypost.biz in the UK. I think they're called something else now, Seaspring Seeds, but it redirects. They took care of me so well that I've told hundreds, and now through the internet, thousands of people over the years, that they're doing an outstanding job sending peppers by post. There you go. Because they took care of me. So when you focus on the journey and focus on giving genuine answers, you are not undermining the outcome. It is a big shift in mindset, because all the tools and tricks, all these tactics you've been taught, focus on the kill, if you like. They focus on closing the deal. What we're doing here is taking a much more strategic approach. We're looking at the overall big picture, which is building relationships and having genuine conversations. Think about it. Qualifying in sales is having a trust-based relationship where you have a genuine conversation and you figure out, can I help you? And if I can, if it's a great fit, I will tell you about it. But if it's not a great fit, I will not exploit that. And that's the core shift we're doing here. So even if you now shift over to something where you don't immediately get a sale, you're still much better off, because you're building great relationships and you're leaving that massive goodwill in the marketplace. So even if there's no business coming out of it, you are pretty much guaranteed you will get referrals, you will get perhaps business from them later on. Alrighty, so we're going from this here, I'm not interested, to because, and this is the key thing, because people don't want to be sold to. And the approach we're taking now is by answering these questions in an open and honest way. We're no longer taken advantage of. We're no longer employing or deploying these persuasion-based tactics at the beginning, at the end of the sales cycle. Instead, we're focusing on answering their true questions. And a little side note, I'll show you this in a separate video. Answering questions comes in different guises. It also comes in the form of enabling people to take advantage or to even use your product or service. But that's for the next video. So once you get this shift in, you get to a situation where people say, well, I'm interested, do tell me more. Because they are now not afraid of look, I'm going to be taken advantage of. This whole thing, I think, is beautifully summarized by Peter Drucker's famous quote, "The aim of marketing is to make selling superfluous." And the big insight a lot of people overlook here is that the selling he talks about is not selling in general. Qualifying properly is the essence of selling. Prospecting done the right way is essential to great selling. But selling is serving. What he's talking about here is the salesy rubbish, the hitting people over the head with urgency and scarcity and bonuses, price wars where you drop your prices endlessly in order to get business, anything that undermines your own bottom line, using power words and headlines to attract attention. Look, free beer, so just people pay attention. That nonsense, that is what he's talking about, which is what you want to eliminate. So the overall big picture is to shift over from a tactic-based, so very tactically oriented sales approach where we say, look, let's deploy this urgency thing here, to a more strategic thing where we look at the underlying questions people have that no one else is answering. And when you've got that in place, this is kind of the ideal outcome. You have two people having a conversation, and then if they come to an agreement, wonderful. And what we're doing now is, like I said, less tactics, more strategy. We look at wherever traffic is coming from, wherever inquiries are coming from, whether it's through the newspaper or the internet or the phone or LinkedIn or even at the bottom referrals. We want them go over or take the next step, and need to be aware of that in the beginning people are not interested. They're saying, I'm not interested, and the reason is they have been burnt before. And that's what I mentioned right in the beginning. People have been burnt before, and as a result, they are skeptical. And that's why you have to look at how to get their attention in a way like we did with Dave. The original offer did not work. And then we worked with it and found things where people go, I'd like to raise my hand. I'm interested. Do tell me more. From there, we look at, well, what are the causes of the smokescreen objections? And of course, these smokescreen objections are based on a lack of trust. They go, well, look, deep down, I know I'm not ready, but you're telling me I'm ready. And as a result, I'd rather say, well, I need to ask my mum. And then, of course, you have real objections. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there are real questions. People go, well, look, I don't have this in place, for example. What happens if, when? And in an ideal world, especially when you build a strategically oriented marketing system, now Peter Drucker style, where a lot of that pre-qualifying and pre-selling happens, then you need to deal with real objections. And ideally, you do it in an automated way, so you don't have to spend your valuable time with the client or prospective client talking about objections which are very common, and you might as well do it in an automated way. So there you go. This is the overall approach which addresses that one underlying issue, namely, I'm not interested. And now you've seen the I'm not interested really has nothing to do with you, your product or your service, or the fact that people are genuinely not interested. Not at all. It has all to do with the fact that most of the tactics deployed these days focus on the wrong end of the stick, and they put people at unease. They are skeptical, they become blind to it, and as a result, a lot of people do more and more of it, which gets into this vicious shouting louder cycle. This is the solution here. If you'd like to know how to do this in practice, what the underlying, there's a 4-step model. It's focused on that cycle of, or the micro yeses leading to the macro yes. If you're interested in how to do that, there is a link further down below. And if you have any questions, there's also a link how you can get in touch, and I'd love to hear from you. Alrighty, cheers, bye.